She left without a word after the broken marriage, but a short while later, a duke's carriage came for her. The grand ballroom of Ashford House shimmered beneath a canopy of crystal chandeliers, their light refracting into 1,000 diamonds upon the polished marble floor. Guests whispered behind delicate fans, their eyes flickering with curiosity, suspicion, and barely concealed judgment. Lady Emily Carrington stood at the edge of this gilded world, a figure of elegance wrapped in ivory silk, her hands folded lightly before her, fingers trembling ever so slightly beneath the lace of her gloves. Her heart, though draped in the outward calm of propriety, thudded with a quiet dissonance, a rhythm of doubt, regret, and longing she could not suppress. Across the room, George Harding moved with the practiced ease of a man accustomed to admiration. He was tall, his dark hair perfectly coiffed, his smile polished and disarming. There was a warmth in his gaze, or so it appeared, but it was a warmth that never reached his eyes, which remained ever calculating, ever distant. The assembled society, family, friends, relatives, and patrons of fashion, watched with barely concealed approval as George engaged in polite conversation, his charm a polished veneer masking the hollowness beneath. Emily's chest tightened as she watched him, the dissonance between public admiration and private betrayal pressing upon her like a vice. Her own reflection caught in a gilded mirror across the room startled her, a pale, composed lady in a gown of the finest satin, yet with eyes that betrayed a quiet sorrow. The silk of her dress clung gently, almost conspiratorially to her figure, but it could not mask the tension coiled in her shoulders, the subtle stiffness in her posture. Every gentle smile she offered to the world felt rehearsed, hollowed by the absence of the warmth she had once believed marriage would bring. Whispers floated like moths around her, light yet insistent, brushing against the soft fabric of her dignity. "The bride is radiant," one voice murmured, though it carried a note of uncertainty, an unspoken question lingering at the edges. "Though I hear there have been complications," another said, eyes darting to her in swift, polite curiosity. Each murmur of speculation, each pointed glance, was a subtle dagger, eroding the fragile confidence she had painstakingly maintained. Emily's lips pressed together. She could not afford a slip, not here, not in a room so alive with judgment. Yet, every heartbeat seemed to echo the knowledge she could no longer ignore, that the life promised by her marriage was but a beautifully carved cage. George approached her then, bowing with ceremonious charm, his eyes resting on hers with a warmth that almost fooled the unsuspecting. "Emily," he said, voice smooth as polished wood, "you look—" He paused, searching for a phrase that would suit the eyes of the company as well as his own amusement. "Perfect as always." There was no real tenderness in the syllables, only the subtle precision of a man skilled in social performance. Emily inclined her head, offering a smile as measured as it was brittle, and in that small exchange the truth of their union lay bare. Appearances were paramount, reality negligible. The orchestra began a delicate waltz, and Emily felt herself drawn into its rhythm with the other couples. Her partner, a distant cousin of George, spun her effortlessly, yet each turn seemed a mirror of the turn she had taken within her own heart, spinning, circling, never landing where she truly desired. Around her, the room bloomed with the laughter of the confident, the sparkle of gems, the glint of polished silver, yet beneath the surface lay currents of quiet cruelty. Eyes watched, measured, compared. Whispers stitched themselves into invisible threads that bound her dignity and threatened to unravel it at the slightest misstep. Emily's gaze drifted to the balcony beyond the grand French doors, the night a silken cloak punctuated by the soft glow of lanterns. She longed for a moment of escape, a breath of air that would remind her of the world beyond perfumed gossip and feigned compliments. The city lay below in shadow and light, indifferent to the private tragedies and triumphs unfolding above. She pressed her fingertips to the glass, feeling the chill, the sense of separation between the person she presented to the world and the person she had always known herself to be. It was then that George's hand brushed hers, a fleeting touch that spoke of possession rather than affection. Emily recoiled subtly, not out of defiance but instinct, the memory of whispered rumors, neglected promises, and small betrayals forming a tide against the calm exterior she presented. She had loved him once, perhaps, with the naive conviction of youth, but that love had withered quietly beneath the weight of lies and the slow erosion of respect. Each whispered infidelity, each careless word, each dismissive glance had left its mark, invisible yet indelible. Emily's eyes fell on a small cluster of guests nearby, their expressions half concealed behind fans, their gossip spilling in silken threads she could hear even above the music. They did not know the truth, how could they? They saw only the bride, the social debutante, the poised and polished image of perfection. None saw the quiet desperation beneath her composure, the ache of a heart longing for sincerity, for freedom, for a love that did not demand subservience or silence. And so she moved with grace, her steps measured, her bow perfect, while within a storm brewed, one that would soon demand release. A bell tolled softly from the distant chapel, a subtle reminder of vows taken under expectation rather than devotion. Emily's chest constricted. She imagined the words she might have spoken, the confessions of longing and regret that remained lodged in her throat. The ballroom's grandeur could not shield her from the truth. Her marriage was a gilded cage, and George, though handsome and admired, was the keeper of her quiet despair. Her thoughts fluttered like trapped birds, wings brushing against the confines of propriety and public expectation. And then, as if the heavens themselves conspired with her heart, Emily felt a moment of clarity. She would not break down here, not in the center of the ballroom, not under the gaze of the inquisitive and the judgmental. Her dignity, fragile yet unyielding, would be her armor. She would endure this night, maintain the facade, but in her mind, a quiet resolve began to form. There would come a time when she would leave, when the truth of her desires and the integrity of her heart would be honored. Tonight she would survive, tomorrow she would begin. The music swelled and Emily's gaze lifted, capturing George's smile, the crystal chandeliers, the glittering guests, all of it reflecting a world that demanded perfection at the cost of authenticity. She felt a strange mixture of despair and determination, the taste of tears bitter and clarifying. For the first time she allowed herself to envision a path not dictated by others, a path shaped by her own heart. The ballroom, the whispers, the polished smiles, all of it would remain, but she would not be consumed. With that silent vow, Emily straightened her spine, lifted her chin, and stepped lightly across the marble floor, a single movement of grace and defiance that caught the eye of every observer. The room seemed to pause, breath held, as if sensing the subtle shift, the quiet, unspoken rebellion of a woman refusing to be defined by circumstance. And in that instant, the audience could see not only a bride in silk, but a soul awakening, a heart preparing to reclaim its own story. As the waltz continued and the orchestra played on, Emily moved through the crowd, her composure intact, her inner life aflame with the promise of something beyond the hollow grandeur surrounding her. She had survived the night, yes, but she knew with a certainty both terrifying and exhilarating, that the most crucial act of her life was yet to come. And somewhere, in the shadows of the vast estate, a carriage waited, an unknown hand poised to alter the course of her destiny. The ballroom glittered. The guests whispered. And Emily Carrington, the bride of appearances, had already begun her quiet, resolute escape from the life she never wanted. The morning after the ballroom's glittering performance of etiquette and whispered malice, the corridors of Ashford House felt eerily silent, the echoes of silk skirts and measured laughter replaced by a hushed tension. Lady Emily Carrington moved through the long hallway with a careful grace, her footsteps softened by the thick Persian carpet, yet her mind roared with the memory of the previous night's humiliation. Every glance she had endured, every subtle murmur, was now etched into her consciousness like indelible ink. And yet, amidst the sharp sting of society's judgment, a small ember of defiance glimmered within her, a determination that would not allow gossip and falsehoods to dictate the course of her life. A letter awaited her on the polished mahogany writing desk in her chambers, sealed with the wax crest of Ravenwell Abbey. Emily's pulse quickened as she lifted the envelope, its weight both literal and metaphorical, a token of curiosity and perhaps reprieve. The handwriting, elegant and deliberate, belonged unmistakably to Richard Montgomery, Duke of Ravenwell, the man who had silently admired her from the peripheries of polite society. He never intruded, never forced the hand of fate. He observed, with the patience of a man confident in the truth of his intentions. The letter itself, though modest in appearance, carried a gravity that no jewel or trinket could rival. She broke the wax seal, revealing words that spoke with a tenderness and insight that George Harding's empty charm could never provide. Lady Emily, the letter began, the world may conspire to obscure the clarity of heart, yet I have observed the constancy of yours. Permit me, at the earliest convenience, to offer a conversation, uninterrupted by the pretenses that bind the hallways of society. Yours are. Her eyes lingered on the script, a delicate tremor coursing through her fingers. There was no flamboyant declaration, no extravagant display, only respect, admiration, and the quiet strength of a man who understood that love was not a spectacle but a profound, deliberate act. Emily felt a warmth bloom, fragile yet insistent, in the midst of the cold weight pressing upon her chest. The letter was more than words, It was an offering, a small token of hope in a world governed by falsehoods and appearances. Yet even as she held the letter, the murmurs of scandal began to gather momentum like a storm advancing across the moors. News of her unease, of whispered discontent in her marriage, had traveled with swift and merciless efficiency. Ladies in morning gowns whispered over tea, their fans fluttering in delicate panic as they speculated on the nature of Emily's distress. Gentlemen, ostensibly engaged in polite discourse, allowed their eyebrows to arch with subtle judgment, each gesture a silent condemnation of a woman whose heart dared to seek freedom. Every word, every gesture of society, became another layer of suffocating pressure, a demonstration of the cruel precision with which gossip could carve its path through the reputation of an innocent. George, seemingly unaware of the moral devastation he had orchestrated through neglect and infidelity, arrived in Emily's chambers with his usual polished smile. "Emily, my dear," he said, bowing slightly, "I hear some rather unfortunate whispers this morning. How tiresome such tales can be, cannot they?" His voice was smooth, measured, but laced with the faintest trace of irritation, as if the mere existence of public attention to his own misconduct was inconvenient. Emily's lips curved into a polite smile, carefully balanced between dignity and restraint. She did not trust herself to speak, for words could betray the storm within her more readily than tears. George's hand extended over hers, a gesture meant to assert possession, yet it felt hollow, almost theatrical. "Surely you have nothing to fear, my dear? Your place is secure," he said, yet Emily's eyes, steady and unwavering, reflected only the truth he could never perceive, that her place was not defined by his will, but by her own. The morning light, filtering through the lace curtains, cast elongated shadows across the room, stretching across her heart as if to remind her that freedom had not yet been claimed but was tantalizingly near. It was then that Emily received a package, small, yet heavy with significance, from a messenger whose eyes betrayed the same discretion and respect that Richard himself exhibited. She opened it with careful fingers to find a delicate brooch, fashioned in gold and adorned with a single flawless sapphire. The accompanying note read, "A token of admiration, to remind you that some hearts see what others overlook." The simplicity of the gesture, the elegance of its thought, pierced Emily with a quiet certainty. Here was a man who cherished her autonomy, who understood her worth, and who offered not grandiose proclamations but subtle affirmations of devotion. The brooch became a talisman in her daily life, pinned upon her gown as she navigated the treacherous currents of society. Its presence was a quiet rebellion, a whisper of defiance against the judgments that threatened to consume her. Each glance in the mirror reflected more than fabric and lace. It reflected a woman beginning to reclaim the fragments of her own story. Yet, despite these small victories, the shadows of gossip loomed, growing bolder with every passing hour. A luncheon at Ashford House soon provided a stage for the full drama of rumor and reproach. Emily, maintaining composure, accepted her place at the table with measured grace. Around her, the other guests exchanged glances, their voices dipped in honey yet sharpened with insinuation. "It is quite the scandal, is it not?" one whispered to another, barely concealing delight at the perceived misfortune of a lady once admired for her beauty and composure. Another added, "I wonder if Mr. Harding realizes the effect of his indifference." Each comment, each pointed smile, was a reminder of the precariousness of reputation in a world that measured worth by obedience rather than heart. Emily sipped her tea, the delicate porcelain trembling slightly in her fingers. She met George's gaze for a fleeting moment, and in it saw the complete absence of remorse. The man's charm remained unbroken, yet it revealed the hollowness that had long haunted her marriage. The realization struck with cruel precision. The scandal was not merely social but deeply personal. Her heart had been dismissed, her dignity skirted over, and her autonomy questioned. And yet, in the quiet strength of Richard's tokens, the letter, the brooch, she found a mirror of her own courage, a reminder that not all who observed were intent on harm. By the afternoon, Emily retreated to the garden, the formalities of the house fading as she stepped into the cool shadow of ancient oaks. The flowers, dew-laden and trembling in the spring breeze, seemed to nod in silent understanding of her plight. She touched the sapphire brooch at her breast and allowed herself a deep, steadying breath. The world could gossip, whisper and condemn, but she possessed the singular truth of her heart. Her choices, her desires, and her integrity remained hers alone. As evening fell, casting a golden hue over the estate, Emily's resolve solidified. The scandal could not define her. The tokens of quiet devotion reminded her of possibilities beyond the gilded cage of societal expectation. Somewhere in the quiet distance, the figure of Richard Montgomery lingered, not in sight, but in the assurance that truth and patience carried their own weight. And Emily, heart brimming with fragile hope and simmering determination, understood that the turning point of her story was approaching. A moment when courage, integrity, and the quiet assertion of self would converge to reshape her destiny. The day concluded with the hush of twilight settling over Ashford House, and Emily, standing by the window overlooking the gardens, whispered to herself a promise that the scandal and tokens were but preludes. The real journey, the reclamation of her heart, her dignity, and her freedom, was yet to come. And somewhere, beyond the lantern-lit avenues and shadowed corridors, a carriage waited, carrying with it the possibility of truth, redemption, and the first step toward the love she had always deserved. The evening air carried the faint scent of lilacs as Emily walked through the secluded garden of Ravenwell Abbey, the fading sunlight casting elongated shadows across the gravel path. The soft rustle of leaves and the distant call of a nightingale seemed to accompany her steady, measured steps, each one a deliberate act of reclaiming her own agency. Though the scandal of Ashford House still lingered like a persistent fog in her mind, here, in the quiet sanctuary of the Duke's estate, she felt the first stirrings of clarity and resolve. Richard Montgomery emerged from the shadows of the yew hedges, his silhouette framed by the last glimmers of twilight. The Duke's presence was commanding yet unobtrusive, a paradox that spoke volumes of the man who had observed her with unwavering patience. He bowed slightly, the gesture of respect accentuated by the solemnity in his eyes. "Lady Emily," he said, his voice gentle yet laden with the gravity of unspoken understanding, "I trust the day has treated you with some measure of mercy, though I know the world's judgment has been less forgiving." Emily's lips curved into a faint, restrained smile, one that concealed the tumult of her emotions. She regarded Richard with a mixture of gratitude and guarded anticipation. "It has been revealing," she replied softly, the words carrying both the sting of past humiliation and the tentative hope of something yet to come. "And you, my lord? Do the shadows of the world find their way here as well?" Richard's eyes softened, yet the depth of his gaze betrayed the weight of concern he carried for her. "Only insofar as they touch upon what is real and deserving of protection. You have endured much, Emily, and yet here you stand, resolute, dignified, unbowed. It is a testament to the strength that the world, in its cruelty, seldom acknowledges in women such as yourself." The two walked side by side along the gravel path, their steps falling into a rhythm that seemed to suspend time itself. Emily felt the gravity of her own hesitation, a lifetime of restraint and social expectation pressing upon her shoulders. Yet in Richard's presence, the burden was tempered by a rare sincerity. The tokens he had sent, the letter, the delicate sapphire brooch, were not merely gestures of affection, they were invitations to speak truths long suppressed. And now at last she sensed that the moment for confession had arrived. Emily paused beneath the boughs of an ancient oak, its leaves whispering secrets in the wind. She unclasped the brooch, letting it rest in her palm, a symbol of the careful trust she was prepared to extend. "Richard," she began, her voice trembling slightly despite her efforts at composure, "I have carried the weight of many eyes and countless whispers. For too long, I have hidden my own heart beneath the expectations of others. But in you I see something I have never dared to hope for, a respect for what is mine to give freely." Richard regarded her silently, allowing her words to settle, each syllable a revelation that bridged the chasm between scandal and truth. "Emily," he said finally, his tone rich with quiet emotion, "it is not enough that the world admire you superficially, nor that it attempt to dictate the course of your affections. My concern has always been that your heart remains untrammeled by the trivialities and cruelties of society. Speak freely, and know that every word will be received without judgment." A sigh escaped her lips, a delicate release of tension that had accumulated over countless days of polite pretense. "I was bound to a marriage that was no marriage at all," she confessed, her eyes glistening in the fading light. "George Harding, he is charming to the eye, wealthy, admired, yet he has never seen me. His attentions are fleeting, his promises hollow. I played the part expected of a lady, but the performance has left me hollow as well. And now, I fear the world will see my departure as scandal rather than the reclamation of my own dignity." Richard stepped closer, his presence both protective and reassuring, the shadows of the oak dappling his face in a manner that made him seem almost ethereal. "Scandal," he said gently, "is a construct of those who fear truth. It has no power over the substance of your choices, nor the integrity of your spirit. You have endured the perfidy of a man unworthy of your heart, and in doing so, you have proven your courage. That is the measure of a lady, Emily, not the idle gossip that seeks to diminish her. Her fingers tightened around the brooch, the small token suddenly imbued with a profound symbolism. I have longed for someone who could see me as I am, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Someone who does not demand submission but offers understanding. In you, Richard, I find the patience, the constancy, and the respect I have sought in vain. Richard lowered his gaze to meet hers, the intensity of his eyes softened by tenderness and genuine admiration. Emily, he murmured, know that my devotion has never been a question of possession, but of recognition. I have waited not because I doubted, but because I understood that true affection cannot be rushed. To step into my care is not to relinquish your autonomy, it is to embrace a partnership in which your voice, your desires, and your judgment are honored above all else. A shiver ran down Emily's spine, a mixture of relief and anticipation. She realized in that moment that the emotional toll of years under false pretenses had finally begun to lift. The weight of expectation, the subtle torment of society's scrutiny, and the quiet ache of unfulfilled longing were yielding to a rare and precious clarity. In Richard's presence she could breathe without constraint, could acknowledge the authenticity of her own heart without fear of reprisal. The garden around them seemed to exhale, the evening shadows lengthening as if to grant them privacy and time. Emily extended her hand, placing it lightly against Richard's. The gesture, simple and unadorned, spoke more than any declaration ever could. I wish to step forward, she said, her voice gaining strength, not as a lady subject to idle conjecture, but as a woman who claims her own path. Will you walk beside me? Richard's hand closed over hers, firm yet gentle, anchoring her to the certainty she had long sought. Always, Emily, he replied, the words carrying a quiet intensity that resonated with the weight of promises made in the heart rather than uttered in public. From this moment the world's whispers matter little. What matters is the fidelity of our hearts and the choices we make in accordance with truth. Emily's eyes filled with tears, not of sorrow but of release. For the first time in years she felt seen, not as an ornament, a possession, or a subject of curiosity, but as a woman of substance, capable of making decisions that honored both her dignity and her desires. The confession had not merely been verbal, it had been an acknowledgement of self, a reclaiming of power long denied by circumstance and societal expectation. As twilight deepened into night, the first stars began to twinkle above Ravenwell Abbey, their cold light mirrored by the warmth of understanding and commitment now shared between them. Emily's heart, once burdened by the falsity of her previous marriage and the relentless scrutiny of society, now beat with a tentative, hopeful rhythm. In Richard's quiet, unwavering presence, she found the courage to imagine a future where love was measured not by performance, but by respect, devotion, and the daily acts that cemented trust. They remained there, side by side, speaking little and yet understanding all. The garden, the night, and the tokens of devotion, the letter, the brooch, the unwavering patience, had converged to create a moment of profound intimacy and irrevocable decision. Emily's private confession had not only unburdened her soul but had also forged a path toward the life she had longed to live, one of love earned through truth, dignity, and deliberate choice. And as the distant chiming of the Abbey clock marked the passing hours, she knew with quiet certainty that the turning point of her story, the moment when scandal and indecision yielded to courage and devotion, had arrived, setting the stage for the final chapters of her journey. Dawn broke over Ravenwell Abbey with a gentle golden light that spilled through the tall mullioned windows, illuminating the grand halls with a warmth that seemed to affirm the promise of new beginnings. The air carried the subtle fragrance of dew-laden roses climbing the stone terraces, mingling with the faint aroma of polished oak and waxed floors. Within the abbey, Emily Carrington stood before the mirror in her chambers, the soft silk of her gown brushing against the marble as if rehearsing the delicate balance of elegance and strength she now embodied. Today was no ordinary day, though it seemed at first glance merely ceremonial. It was the culmination of years of restraint, courage, and quiet longing. Richard Montgomery entered the room, his presence filling it with a quiet gravity that bespoke both authority and unwavering devotion. His gaze swept over Emily with a reverence that had grown from patient observation into something far deeper, a recognition of the trials she had endured and the dignity she had preserved despite the world's ceaseless scrutiny. "Emily," he began, his voice low and deliberate, "today we step not merely into a union sanctioned by society, but into the acknowledgement of truths long held and carefully nurtured. I have watched you navigate the tempests of false expectations and shallow adoration, and in doing so, I have come to understand the extraordinary depth of your character. Emily turned to him, her eyes glistening with a mixture of anticipation and restrained excitement. "Richard," she whispered, her tone threaded with a newfound confidence, "it is in your patience, your steadfast regard, that I have discovered the courage to embrace my own heart without fear. The shadows of the past, George Harding's empty promises, the whispers of scandal, no longer dictate my choices. Today I claim the freedom to love fully and without compromise." The Duke approached, his hand extending toward hers, a gesture that was both an invitation and a declaration. As their fingers met, a silence settled over the room, not of absence but of mutual understanding, a quiet acknowledgement that the moment was charged with significance beyond words. "Emily," Richard continued, "in this world, we are often pressed to conform to society's rigid definitions of propriety, to sacrifice our desires for the sake of appearances. But I have learned that true devotion demands more than compliance. It requires recognition, respect, and the courage to act in accordance with one's heart. Will you allow me the honor of walking beside you, not as a custodian of your will, but as an equal, a partner in life and in love?" Tears threatened to spill over Emily's composure, yet she steadied herself, drawing strength from the certainty that had taken root in her soul. "I will," she replied, her voice steady, "not because of duty nor the allure of comfort, but because I see in you the embodiment of all that I have long sought: respect, constancy, and a love untainted by artifice." The Abbey's vast windows reflected the morning sun, and in that brilliance the room seemed to expand, embracing the couple in a luminous cocoon. Emily's hand remained in Richard's, their interlocked fingers symbolizing a union founded not on fleeting passion or superficial admiration, but on deliberate, mutual choice. The world beyond the Abbey walls, with its whispers and judgments, felt distant, insignificant in comparison to the gravity of their shared commitment. A servant entered quietly, bearing a small casket, its surface polished and gleaming. Emily opened it to reveal the delicate sapphire brooch Richard had first sent her months before, the emblem of his patience and fidelity. She fastened it to her gown, the gesture silent yet profoundly symbolic. "This," she murmured, "is more than a jewel. It is the manifestation of steadfast devotion, a reminder that love may flourish only when nurtured with respect and truth." Richard's gaze softened, and he inclined his head slightly, acknowledging the significance of the moment. "It is yours," he said simply, "as is all that I hold in esteem, for you are the guiding light that has restored meaning to my life." Their journey through the corridors of Ravenwell Abbey to the chapel was marked by a quiet dignity. The morning sun cast prismatic reflections upon the marble floors, each step echoing as a testament to the solemnity of their choice. Servants and attendants, long accustomed to the measured pace of noble ceremony, observed with a reverent hush, aware that the union about to take place was unlike any ordinary wedding. It was a confluence of courage, truth, and love, forged in the crucible of societal expectation and personal integrity. The chapel itself was adorned with lilies and roses, the blooms arranged with meticulous care to mirror the purity and elegance of the occasion. Richard and Emily stood before the altar, the flickering candlelight painting their faces in warm, golden hues. The officiant spoke with the measured cadence of tradition, yet even his voice seemed subdued in the presence of the palpable emotional resonance that enveloped the room. Emily's gaze met Richard's, and in that instant all prior fears, of scandal, of judgment, of past deceit, dissolved. The only reality that mattered was the authenticity of the love they shared and the deliberate choice to honor it. As vows were exchanged, Emily's words rang clear and unwavering, a declaration not of subservience but of partnership. "I pledge to you my heart, my trust, and my unwavering respect. In the quiet moments and the trials that may come, I shall remain steadfast, honoring both your devotion and the freedom of my own soul." Richard responded with equal sincerity, his words a mirror of her sentiment. "I vow to cherish your heart, to honor your judgment, and to love you through both triumph and adversity, without demand or constraint, but with unwavering fidelity." The chapel seemed to exhale in unison with their pledges, the sunlight streaming through the stained glass casting rainbows across their joined hands. The moment crystallized into a singularity of emotion and intent, two hearts no longer bound by social artifice, but united by choice, respect, and the quiet, enduring power of love. As they stepped from the chapel into the sunlit gardens of Ravenwell Abbey, the world outside continued its relentless motion, yet within these grounds time seemed suspended. Emily's laughter, delicate yet liberated, mingled with the soft rustle of leaves and the distant chirping of birds, a testament to the joy and relief that had replaced the shadows of scandal. Richard's arm encircled her waist, a protective and tender gesture that spoke more than words ever could, signaling a partnership forged in truth rather than obligation. In the weeks that followed, Ravenwell Abbey became more than a home. It was a sanctuary where love and duty coexisted, where Emily's charitable endeavors, schools for children and safe havens for women, flourished under her careful attention, and Richard's reforms improved the lives of tenants and villagers alike. Their son Henry arrived in time, a living emblem of the unity and devotion that had been forged in patience and truth, his laughter echoing through the halls like a promise of enduring joy. Meanwhile, George Harding's decline was as inevitable as the dawn. His shallow pursuits and selfish indulgences left him bereft of respect and comfort, a cautionary testament to the perils of vanity and deceit. By contrast, Emily and Richard's life was a symphony of deliberate choices, quiet resilience, and shared purpose. In each day's measured decisions, they discovered that love was not a grand proclamation or a fleeting passion, but a series of actions that sustained trust, honored dignity, and nurtured the soul. In the final quiet of the evening, as Emily sat by the fire with Richard reading beside her, she reflected on the tumultuous journey that had led her to this sanctuary of authenticity. The mistakes she had once feared were indelibly instructive, each one a step toward understanding the difference between deception and genuine affection. She smiled softly, the weight of years lifting from her shoulders, and whispered to herself with profound certainty, "This is the life I was meant to claim, not given but chosen. And it is more beautiful than I ever imagined." Richard glanced at her, sensing the unspoken reflection, and pressed a tender kiss to her temple. "Indeed, Emily," he said, "for we have discovered that love is measured not in declarations or the clamor of public approval, but in the quiet constancy of shared hearts and unwavering respect." And so, Ravenwell Abbey remained, not merely as a grand estate of stone and gardens, but as a testament to courage, choice, and the enduring power of love, where scandal had been vanquished by truth, and where two hearts, patient and steadfast, had found their rightful home.